I would note as we sit here today that we had a number of issues that are of paramount importance to the American people. And one of which, of course, being from the state of Texas, is the state of our border. Today, official numbers came out from Border Patrol that there were 234,088 encounters in April. Of those, some 96,908 were turned away under so-called Title 42 under our health codes. But what that means is that at least 137,180 were released into the United States, and perhaps more. 1,300 pounds of fentanyl intercepted. Of course, today, Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, is down in the Rio Grande Valley doing photo ops. He'll go down to the valley so he can try to hide what he said to me and what he said to Republicans in the House Judiciary Committee who were questioning him just 2 weeks ago when we said, "Do you have operational control of the border?" And he said, "Yes, I do." Well, I wonder if my friend from Pennsylvania could help explain to the American people how 234,000 apprehensions, of which almost 30,000 are being turned into the United States, how that is somehow operational control. You were an officer in the United States military. Does that sound like operational control to you?
Well, I thank my friend, the good gentleman from Texas, and I think that what most people don't understand, and some even in this body, is that when you think about operational control of the border, you're assuming that the administration wants to stop people from illegally crossing. You're thinking that they're about border security and about national security. We actually vote in this body, as you know, to fund at higher levels, Border Patrol, ICE, and many on our side of the aisle even voted for it, either unwittingly or knowing that this administration was actually going to use that money not to stop people from coming across the border illegally, not to uphold the law, not to stop the invasion that is guaranteed by our Constitution to the states, but to actually become more efficient at processing individuals coming across the border illegally and moving them very quickly into the interior of the country. They use the money so that they don't have the optics of what's happening at what happened at the Del Rio Bridge, right? That's why they want it to be more efficient. They don't want the optic of people huddling underneath a bridge coming from some other countries or some other places illegally and not having anywhere to go. And the squalor and the potential crime element that is associated with it, since they don't want that optic, what they've used is the money that's been appropriated, the additional money, not to mention all the money that's already been appropriated, to move them more efficiently into the interior of the country. So when the Secretary says he has operational control, sure, they're operationally controlling the influx of illegal aliens, right? That's the actual definition, right? That's the word that's used, illegal aliens into the country. And so on that charge, they're actually doing very well. Unfortunately, the American people, as my friend Chip Roy, the good gentleman from Texas, knows, are suffering right now under horrific high prices that they barely can afford, whether it's for fuel in their car, whether it's for being able to buy groceries if you can find them, and heaven forbid you're a family that's got a small child that needs formula. No extra money for that, Mr. Roy. No extra money for Americans.
Well, and as the gentleman knows, as we speak, as we sit here in the People's House, I just got an update from the border showing that Border Patrol is building a new soft-sided tent compound in Eagle Pass, Texas. Another picture of it shows big tent with chain link fences up. Remember the kids in cages? Chain link fences up. And it says it's roughly 215,000 square feet, which is almost 5 acres. So to the gentleman's point, why would they be doing that? Why would Secretary Mayorkas be ordering Border Patrol to build a 5-acre tent facility in Eagle Pass, Texas?
Well, you know why.
I know exactly why. Could it be because they believe their mission is to process more aliens coming to the United States, to encourage more to come, have them come across the river, never mind being exploited by the cartels, right, then get put into this facility to be processed and released into the United States?
But without the view of the cameras.
That's right.
Without the access of the American people in to see what's happening in their country. That's the chain That's the chain link fence around it, without the view of what's happening in every single community, which is deaths due to fentanyl overdoses. Every single person in America now can say that they know some family, somebody in their town that died of a fentanyl overdose. So that's coming from China. The good gentleman from Arkansas was just talking about what's happening in China. It comes from China through Mexico, across our southern border, and into your town. That's national security, that's border security, that's health security, and our country and the leadership in this administration is not providing it at this time.
And I know so the gentleman knows that we're feeling that impact in Texas. He just mentioned fentanyl. We just got the new data from the CDC, 117,000 dead Americans. Yet nothing but crickets coming from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. They don't care. They don't care about 117,000 dead Americans. Directly as a consequence of Chinese-produced fentanyl pouring through cartels, through Mexico, into the United States. Nothing. Crickets. Have you seen a bill on the floor of this body to deal with that? Have you seen any efforts by our friends on the other side of the aisle to secure the border of the United States legitimately, or force the hand of Secretary Mayorkas to actually enforce the policies of the United States? And very specifically, we have a discharge petition at the desk with every signature of Republicans, but not one Democrat willing to go to the Democrats leading the administration and say, we need to secure the border of the United States and enforce the policies, including Title 42 and whatever it takes to secure the border. Is the gentleman aware of that?
I am aware of that. I mean, Madam Chairman, right here on this floor, the president came and gave his State of the Union and said he wanted to secure the border. That's what the president said. Wanted to secure the border, yet the fentanyl keeps coming in. The money's been spent. I mean, in many towns, they've defunded the police, right? The drugs keep coming in, and that as there's a primary election going on right now in my home state in Pennsylvania, many people from across the aisle have said they want border protection, they want national security, they want to stop the fentanyl, but given any opportunity to vote in favor of that, to come down and sign a discharge petition, not one Democrat signed a discharge petition to force that bill to the floor to say, keep Title 42 in place and leave us an opportunity to make sure that people and drugs and the crime element supported by the cartels doesn't come to America. Not one will step up, Mr. Roy.
Well, let me ask you a question. We're talking about the extent to which the American people are hurting. You talked about the baby formula. We're talking about the border, wide open borders, fentanyl pouring in, American people dying. What about the fact that gasoline prices are skyrocketing, energy prices are going up, and we know we are producing 55 million fewer barrels of oil in February of 2022 than we did in February of 2020? That the United States is expected to revert to being a net oil importer in 2022 after we had become a net oil exporter. In March 2020 debate, President Biden said, quote, no more drilling on federal lands, no more drilling, including offshore, no ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period. Yet my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they don't want to talk about that because they know full well it is precisely the policies of the administration to purposely limit the ability to produce oil and gas in this country that is empowering Putin to go after Ukraine, and that is damaging the price of gas at the pump and harming the American people. And our Democrat colleagues sit silent because they worship at the altar of the green agenda, because that is their agenda, not the benefit of the American people, not the ability to drive your car, go to work, take care of your family, afford gas, afford the goods and services that are going up because the diesel prices are going up, the inflation that is skyrocketing, because they refuse to open up American oil and gas, which we sit on a bevy of and is enormously important for our national security and the national security of our friends around the world. And I know that the gentleman being from Pennsylvania is well aware of the absurd energy policies that are harming the American people because they worship at the altar of the Green New Deal and the green agenda.
That's exactly right, Madam Chairman. This is the American people see and are feeling it every single day when they go to the gas pumps, when they've got to get their kids to soccer games and multiple activities, driving back and forth that they can't afford to fill up their gas tanks anymore. This is because we are in the beginning of implementing the Green New Deal, forcing it on Americans, not letting you make the choice, but letting policymakers in Washington, D.C. determine how your life's going to be. And while the president says in this very body they want to have a vote on price gouging, meanwhile, we're not allowing the people that produce the gas and oil that we desperately need to keep our energy economy going. Our country runs on energy, right? The president is saying no more leases. Not one pipeline's being built. No more leases. No more refining. It's not happening, and actually said that we're producing more gas and oil than ever before in history. But you just gave them the numbers, Mr. Roy. You just gave us the numbers. It's actually less. That's what happens, and you're going to pay more for every single gallon that you buy. You're going to pay more, and this is all by design. They don't want you to have the choice. They actually want to force you to drive an electric vehicle. And as long as we're talking about energy and the lack thereof, Mr. Roy, your state, it was just reported in your state to be prepared for blackouts and brownouts because there's going to be a lack of electricity production. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 21st century. America knows how to produce energy. We know how to make electricity, know how to transport it. But yet it's happening in California, and now it's going to start cascading across the country because of the policy decisions of the Green New Deal and those who worship at the altar of this, this agenda, this green agenda that forces us to take these things that we can't afford and are inefficient and ineffective.
Absolutely. It is this green agenda that has us having to bow down to China in order to get the minerals and the resources in order to make solar panels and wind farms. But if you look at Texas, which produces as much wind as any state in the country, Texas only had 17% wind production from its wind farms last week, which was a big chunk of the problem that we had in terms of energy production. Our grid is over-reliant on wind and solar, and when you have a windless, cloudy day, what do you need? You need fossil fuels. What else do you need? Nuclear power. Do you know how much nuclear power or fossil fuel generation we have in the pipeline, so to speak, right now across this country or even in Texas? Minuscule. Because of the worshiping of this ridiculous agenda. Do you know how many coal-fired plants they have in China? Something like 1,100.
Opening one a week.
And opening one a week. Do you know how many coal-fired plants we're opening in this country? Zippo. Do you know what kind of rules we have coming out right now to hammer the coal industry in Texas and elsewhere? Massive rules. Do you know what that means for the American people? No energy, lower energy, higher costs. That's 100% true and provable. And yet my colleagues on the other side of the aisle walk around in some days going, oh, we're going to get these magic unicorn energy from wind and solar on a windless, cloudy day. It's absolutely absurd. And the American people are suffering. The American people are suffering because of the Democratic policies that are causing harm to them, driving up prices, making it impossible for them to have reliable grid, reliable energy. We're sitting on a mountain of it in this country. And when we're exporting liquefied natural gas from this country, CO2 is going down. We're not relying on China. We're sticking it back on them, and our people are benefiting and prospering. The Democratic agenda is stop that, go beg China, and then pay more for your goods and services. And then what does Joe Biden say? What does Jen Psaki say in all of her infinite wisdom heading off to MSNBC after she accuses our Border Patrol agents of whipping people? She says, oh, buy a Tesla. Go spend $60,000 and go buy an electric car. But you know what? If you're in Austin, Texas, and you want to drive to Midland, I guess you got to stop somewhere in the middle and hope you can charge.
And hope you can charge, and I sure hope you have the time to sit there and charge, right? It's not like filling it up at the gas station, get back in and keep going and make it in a reasonable amount of time. The gentleman from Texas is absolutely right. I mean, he talked about the fact that we're empowering China. 85% of the critical minerals that come to make the solar panels and the windmills come from China. Now, of course, we subsidize all that. That subsidy means it's coming from your tax dollars. And, of course, I don't know whether you know this or not, Mr. Roy, but I suspect you do. Those tax dollars going to pay for those raw materials in China, or then those tax dollars go to mine it.
Yep.
To mine it in the Congo. Right?
Yep.
One of the biggest mines in the world, the biggest mine in the world, slave labor, slave child labor, right? And we're talking about saving the rainforest. Meanwhile, they're cutting all this stuff down to mine these minerals because we can feel good. So we can feel good about ourselves in America. Meanwhile, supporting child slave labor with your taxes, supporting deforestation of the rainforest. For what? For higher prices and less availability. And that it's just going to keep coming, ladies and gentlemen, as long as the agenda of the left keeps being implemented.
You know what I have here in front of me? I have a photograph that a friend, I think he's one of the 6 people watching C-SPAN right now, a friend just texted me and said, here's a picture of gasoline at the pump, diesel, I should say, not gasoline, diesel, 194 gallons. You know what the bill was? $1,090. You want to know what's coming, American people, this summer? When the inventory of diesel, have you looked at the inventory numbers for diesel? Ladies and gentlemen, it's coming. All of those goods and services sitting in trucks that are having to pay $1,090 to fill their tank, that's getting passed on to you. You're going to pay for that. You, the American people, are going to pay for that, while Democrats in this body, in the Senate, and in this administration wave it off, laugh it off, and say, go buy a Tesla. Well, that isn't going to make your prices any cheaper. That isn't going to enable you to be able to afford the goods and services you need. I know we've only got a few minutes left. I wanted to ask one more thing of my friend from Pennsylvania. We're talking here about energy, and we know how much energy is at the central debate about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. And we know the administration didn't do a darn thing leading up to what's happening in Ukraine to cut off Nord Stream 2, to open up American oil and gas, to try to cut off what we knew was coming, what Putin was doing. And yet, last week, we had a vote on the floor of this body on a $40 billion unpaid for blank check in the name of standing with Ukraine. Only 57 members of this body out of 435 possible members, however many are here right now, 57 dared to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should actually debate $40 billion that is not paid for and that is going to go into the State Department, going to the Department of Defense, going around the world, paying for refugee resettlement, paying for food around the world, paying for continued support of military operations in Ukraine. I know the gentleman supports Ukraine and Zelensky. I know the gentleman opposes Putin. But did you have a problem with a $40 billion blank check?
I had a problem with $40 billion with 5 hours. 5 hours of consideration for $40 billion when we took the text to the staff and asked them, what about this line? What's this $300 million? And they said, well, we don't know. And we're expected to vote on that. We're expected to vote for that, or somehow we're aligned with Vladimir Putin. Keep in mind, my good friend from Texas, 2 weeks prior to this, we did this Lend-Lease without any time limit, without any funding limit. Then come back, the president asked for $33 billion. We give him $40 billion. We can't afford our diesel. Pretty soon you're not going to be able to afford your food. We won't do anything on our own border. Prices are going up for every single person. We want to, every American wants to help Ukraine. Well, we're Americans, and the representatives in this body represent America.
You know what? I agree with the gentleman. I support Ukrainians, but I represent Americans. And Americans want to stand alongside Zelensky and push back on Putin, but they want us to do our job responsibly. And when I hear the majority leader of the other party say, quote, a time of war, when I sat with the majority leader in a Rules Committee meeting upstairs, and he said, we're at war, and I'm wondering when we voted to go to war. If we're going to have a proxy war and we're going to give $40 billion to Ukraine because we want to look all fancy with our blue and yellow ribbons and feel good about ourselves, maybe we should actually have a debate in this chamber, a debate in this body, because the American people expect us to do that. When the border of this country is wide open and cartels have control of it and fentanyl is pouring in and we have $30.5 trillion of debt and gas prices are spiking and $1,100 to fill a tank of diesel, and we go, oh, blank check, $40 billion. And by the way, I'm looking at my colleagues on this side of the aisle on that same point. The American people deserve and expect better than that. And I'd yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mr. Roy. The American people, we at least deserve the debate. 5 hours, ladies and gentlemen, 5 hours for $40 billion. People around here complain about all kinds of things.
Heaven forbid we vote on bills put before this body.
Right. That's a problem. But $40 billion, no problem. And meanwhile, our citizens, the citizens that I represent, they're having a hard time figuring out, do they pay their insurance? Do they pay their mortgage? I talk to people on a regular basis that say they put their bills on their table and they put a date on them when they're due and when they think they'll be able to pay for them. They said, I've never had to do that before. I'm selling stuff to pay my bills because I can't afford what's happening in my country right now. And meanwhile, we can't talk for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour about $40 billion to some other country. Meanwhile, we just gave a blank check 2 weeks before to let the president spend any amount of money for any amount of time on the same country. This is a country we didn't declare war.
Well, I know the gentleman's correct. I know we're just about out of time. I would just say in closing, the American people expect us to do our job. The American people expect us to vote. The American people expect us to stand up for them. And that's what we're happy to be here doing, and I appreciate the gentleman joining.
I thank the gentleman from Texas for allowing me to be part of this special order and speak on behalf and fight on behalf of the American people that are struggling right now.
I thank the Speaker.